An arrogant cop, a crowded park, and a man quietly enjoying the sun. The officer thought he'd make an example of a random old guy. What he didn't know was, he just kicked an action legend. The Los Angeles sun was relentless, beating down on the cracked pavement of Echo Park. The air, thick with heat and the distant hum of traffic on the 101, tasted of exhaust and street vendor hot dogs. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. Families pushed strollers along the lake, joggers sweated under the shade of palm trees, and a handful of tourists tried to frame the downtown skyline in their phone cameras. This vibrant, chaotic slice of LA life was the backdrop for a community policing initiative, a PR event designed to show the friendly face of the LAPD. But with Officer Cole Vance on patrol, friendly was the last word on anyone's mind. Vance moved through the park like he owned it. At 6'2", with a chest puffed out by years at the gym and an ego inflated by the power of his badge, he was a spectacle of swagger. He walked with a deliberate, heavy-footed gait, his mirrored sunglasses hiding eyes that were constantly scanning for a target, for someone to make an example of. Trailing him were 3 younger officers, a trio of fresh-faced rookies eager to laugh at his jokes and bask in his reflected authority. For Vance, policing wasn't about protecting and serving, it was a performance, and he was the star. His gaze landed on a man sitting alone on a bench, tucked away beneath the broad leaves of a ficus tree. The man was in his mid-50s, dressed in unassuming gray track pants and a plain black t-shirt. A simple baseball cap was pulled low over his head. He was the picture of stillness in the swirling chaos of the park, sipping from a water bottle and watching the world go by with a quiet intensity. He wasn't looking for attention. He was actively avoiding it. A predator's grin spread across Vance's face. This was perfect. "All right, show's over, Pops," Vance called out, his voice booming with unearned confidence. The rookies behind him snickered on cue. Parks for the public, not for guys taking a nap. The man on the bench looked up. It wasn't a startled or angry glance, just a slow, deliberate acknowledgement. His eyes, visible under the brim of the cap, were a startlingly clear blue. "I'm just sitting," he replied, his voice a low, gravelly rumble with a distinct British accent. "Not in anyone's way." "Wrong," Vance said, stepping closer and cracking his knuckles for effect. "You're in my line of sight. That makes you in my way." One of the rookies, a kid named Evans, shifted his weight, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "Come on, Cole, let him be." Vance ignored him, his focus locked on his target. He leaned in, invading the man's personal space. "What's the deal? This isn't a casting call for a new Expendables movie. You're a little old for that, don't you think?" The man slowly placed his water bottle on the bench beside him. His posture remained relaxed, but a new tension entered his shoulders. "You should probably just walk away now," he said, his voice flat and even. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Vance snorted, a harsh, ugly sound. "Or what?" And then, in a move of shocking, unprovoked aggression, he spun. His polished black boot swung in a vicious arc, connecting with a sickening thud against the side of the man's head. The baseball cap flew off, skittering across the dusty ground. Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Vance's partners burst into laughter, the sound echoing unnaturally in the sudden quiet. "See that?" Vance boomed, turning to his audience. Old man didn't even see it coming. Tough guy. But the man wasn't down. He wasn't even dazed. He was a storm, gathering its power in absolute silence. Slowly, deliberately, the man pushed himself to his feet. He wiped a thin trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his thumb. He bent down, picked up his fallen cap, and dusted it off with a calm, methodical motion. Then he looked up. His gaze didn't just meet Vance's, it seemed to pass straight through him, pinning him to the spot. The laughter from the other officers died in their throats. The air crackled. "I warned you," the man said, his voice still a low growl, but now edged with steel. Vance blinked, the first seed of doubt planting itself in his mind. He fell back on his training, his voice a defensive bark. "You gonna hit me? That's assault on an officer. You'll be in a world of hurt." The man took a single, measured step forward. "I don't need to hit you," he said, his eyes scanning the faces of the 3 other cops, who now looked like guilty schoolboys. "Your career just committed suicide." A murmur rippled through the crowd of onlookers, which had now swelled in size. Phones, like 1,000 tiny fireflies, were suddenly raised, their lenses all pointed at the unfolding drama. "Wait a minute," a teenager near the front whispered, his phone recording. "Is that?" His friend squinted. "Holy crap. That's Jason Statham." The name spread through the crowd like a shockwave. Realization dawned on the faces of the 3 rookie cops, their expressions morphing from amusement to sheer, unadulterated horror. The man their superior officer had just kicked in the face wasn't some random citizen. He was a global action star, a man whose on-screen persona was built on being an unstoppable force of nature. Rookie Evans fumbled for his radio, his hand shaking. "Dispatch, we have a situation at Echo Park." Vance, his face turning a blotchy red, tried to recover. "I don't care who you are. You think because you're in some movies." "I don't think anything," Statham cut him off, his voice sharp as broken glass. He took another step. "You, an officer of the law, just assaulted a citizen for sitting on a bench. You did it for sport. And you did it in front of your team, teaching them that this is acceptable." He gestured with his chin toward the sea of phones. "And in front of them. It was a joke." Vance stammered, taking an involuntary step back. "Don't escalate this." Statham gave a single, sharp nod. Too late. Within 90 seconds, the first clips hit the internet. TikTok, Instagram, X, the footage spread with the speed of a digital wildfire. The headlines wrote themselves: LAPD cop kicks Jason Statham in the face. Regrets it instantly. Echo Park, community outreach ends in assault on action legend. The world was watching. And the next move belonged to the man who had just been kicked. But instead of violence, he chose his words. He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying clearly. "Don't fear bullies in uniform," he said. "Expose them." Then, he turned his back on the frozen, humiliated officer, put his cap back on, and walked away. His dignity was a shield, and every step was a hammer blow to Cole Vance's world. By nightfall, Officer Cole Vance was infamous. His face was plastered across every news site and social media feed on the planet. The video, replayed millions of times from dozens of angles, was undeniable. There was no context that could save him, no explanation that could justify the smug grin on his face as he kicked a seated man. Vance woke the next morning to the digital buzz of his own implosion and 47 voicemails. None were from friends. The one that mattered was from his commanding officer, Captain Miller, a man whose voice sounded like it had been aged in gravel and fury. "Vance. My office. Now. Don't even think about being late." Meanwhile, across town, Jason Statham was the picture of calm. He sat in the minimalist, sun-drenched office of his lawyer and old friend, Daniel Chen. Chen, a sharp-witted civil rights attorney, scrolled through the footage on his tablet, shaking his head. "It's crystal clear, Jason," Chen said, looking up. "Unprovoked assault and battery. We can sue the department into the next century. This is a slam dunk." Statham took a sip of his black tea. "I'm not pressing charges." Chen stared at him. "You're kidding. The man kicked you in the head on camera. And the world is his judge and jury," Statham replied, setting his cup down. "This isn't about money, Daniel. It's about a lesson. Sometimes the best way to teach a lesson is to give a man enough rope and let the world watch him hang himself with it." A slow smile spread across Chen's face. "Still the Zen warrior, I see." Statham's eyes narrowed slightly. I've just added more patience to my punch. At the precinct, Cole Vance sat in a hard plastic chair opposite Captain Miller's desk, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. Miller, a veteran with 30 years on the force, looked at him with a mixture of rage and profound disappointment. "Do you have any idea," Miller began, his voice dangerously low, "how monumentally stupid you look? You didn't just assault a citizen, you moron. You assaulted Jason Statham. A man whose hands are registered as lethal weapons in 3 countries. You kicked a man who could have, by all rights, dismantled you bone by bone and been cheered for it." He was sitting there, looking smug, Vance grumbled, staring at the floor. "I didn't know who he was. Does it matter?" Miller roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "You kicked a seated man in the face in front of witnesses and a dozen cameras. You've made this entire department a global laughingstock." He took a deep breath, composing himself. "You're suspended. Indefinitely. Pending an internal affairs review." Vance's head snapped up. "You can't. That's just for optics." Miller leaned forward, his eyes cold. "No, son. That's for justice. Get out of my office." But Vance wasn't done, at least not in his own head. That night, he met his 2 remaining loyal cronies at a dimly lit sports bar. The beer flowed, and so did the excuses. "They've all turned on me," Vance spat, nursing a whiskey. "Even the chief. Like I'm some rookie. We've all done worse and gotten away with it," one of them, a cop named Hollis, agreed. "Yeah," the other added. "The only difference is you picked the wrong grandpa to mess with." Vance's eyes glinted in the dim light, a dangerous fire rekindling in their depths. "No," he said softly. "The difference is, I'm not going to take this lying down." The next morning, a formal request arrived at the precinct. Jason Statham wished to speak at the upcoming monthly community safety meeting. The request was approved so fast it created a sonic boom in the city administration building. No press was invited, but the room was packed to capacity with citizens, city officials, and a heavy presence of police officers, including Vance's former partners, who sat awkwardly in the back row. When Statham stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the room. He wore a simple, well-fitted dark suit. He had no notes, no prepared speech. He just stood there for a moment, his presence alone commanding the room's full attention. He let his gaze drift across the audience, making eye contact with officer after officer. "I'm not here to throw punches," he began, his voice calm and clear, amplified by the microphone. "I've already been forced to do that in my life, more times than I'd care to count. But today," he paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Today, I'm here to talk about power." The room was utterly still. "Power isn't your badge," he continued, his eyes finding Vance's colleagues. "It isn't your weapon. And it sure as hell isn't the sole of your boot on someone's face. Power is restraint. Power is knowing you could destroy a man, and choosing not to." He looked directly at the 3 officers in the back. "You laughed. You laughed when your friend, your superior, kicked me. Not because I was a threat. But because I was still. Because I was silent. You need to understand something. That silence, that was me giving you a chance to do the right thing. To be better." He took a breath, his gaze sweeping the room one last time. "You failed that test. And now the world is watching to see if you'll learn from it." The applause that erupted was thunderous, a wave of cathartic release from the citizens in the room. It was a standing ovation. In the back, Vance's former partners could only stare at their hands, the shame burning on their faces. They knew, in that moment, that Statham had not only won, he had taken complete control of their story, their careers, and their consciences. Miles away, Cole Vance watched a live stream of the meeting on his phone, sitting in the driver's seat of his black SUV parked in his own dim, oil-stained garage. He watched the applause, heard the cheers, and saw the respect in the eyes of his fellow officers, respect aimed at the man who had ruined him. A low, animalistic growl escaped his lips. His face was a mask of pure, undiluted rage. They had taken his badge, his job, his pride. He had been publicly castrated. And in that moment of absolute fury, he made the worst decision of his life. The next morning broke with an unusual quiet. A cool marine layer had rolled in overnight, muffling the city's usual roar. Jason Statham sat on his front porch, a simple, modern structure in a quiet neighborhood in the hills. He was sipping a cup of tea, the steam curling up into the gray air. Dressed in black as always, he was calm, still, but alert. He had a feeling, a prickle of instinct honed over a lifetime of paying attention. He was rarely wrong. Down the block, Cole Vance sat idling inside his black SUV, the windows tinted to an illegal degree. His face was tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He hadn't slept. The video of the community meeting had replayed in his mind all night, a torturous loop of his own humiliation. He wore plain clothes, but his badge was heavy in his back pocket, a ghost of the authority he'd lost. Everyone saw him as a joke, a bully who got what he deserved. Today, he would fix that. He would rewrite the ending. At 9:13 a.m., Statham stepped off his porch and started a slow walk down the street, heading for a nearby hiking trail. He never carried a weapon. He didn't need one. The SUV's engine revved. It shot forward and screeched to a halt beside him, cutting off his path. Vance jumped out, his face contorted with rage. "Hey!" Statham stopped, turning slowly, his expression one of weary resignation. Vance stormed up to him, fists clenched at his sides. "You humiliated me. You made me look weak." Statham gave him a long, patient look. "I didn't make you anything. You did that all by yourself. Don't play the wise man with me." Vance barked, spittle flying from his lips. "I had a career. I had respect. And you threw it all away," Statham said calmly. "All because your ego couldn't stand the sight of a man sitting quietly. That was it. The final trigger." Vance swung. It was a wild, reckless punch, fueled by pure rage and desperation, meant to knock Statham off his feet and reclaim some shred of his shattered pride. It didn't even come close. Statham moved with the fluid economy of a master craftsman. He swayed back, the punch whistling past his ear. Before Vance could even process the miss, Statham pivoted. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't need to. He delivered a single, sharp open palm strike to Vance's chest. It wasn't a slap, it was a concussive force, delivered with perfect timing and the full power of his body. The impact sent Vance staggering backward, the air exploding from his lungs. He crashed hard against the side of his own SUV, sliding down the door to the pavement with a groan. Statham walked toward him, not to gloat, but to finish the conversation. "You want to learn something now?" he said, his voice low. "Or are you still trying to impress your imaginary audience?" Vance coughed, struggling for breath. You're not even mad." "I was," Statham admitted. "But then I realized something. You're already living in a prison of your own making. There's nothing more I can do to you." He turned to walk away. But Vance, in one last, pathetic act of defiance, reached into his back pocket, pulled out his badge, and threw it at Statham's back. It clattered harmlessly on the asphalt. "You think you're better than me?" Vance choked out. Statham stopped. He turned, bent down, and picked up the badge. He held it in his two hands, the silver eagle glinting in the gray morning light. Then, with a slow, methodical exertion of pressure, he bent the thick metal in half. The creak of protesting steel was the only sound on the quiet street. He tossed the ruined symbol of honor into the dirt at Vance's feet. "I know I'm better than the man you chose to be." By the time other officers arrived, summoned by a neighbor who had witnessed the final, pathetic confrontation, it was all over. They found Cole Vance on his knees on the pavement, his head in his hands, a broken man next to a bent badge. The precinct didn't even bother with a lengthy investigation. His indefinite suspension was upgraded to permanent termination. The district attorney's office, under immense public pressure, opened a case for off-duty assault. Troy's downfall was absolute, public, and self-inflicted. Jason Statham never showed up to press charges. He didn't need to. His point had been made not with fists in a courtroom, but with restraint in the public eye. The incident at Echo Park became a catalyst. It sparked a citywide debate about de-escalation training, police accountability, and the culture of arrogance that sometimes festered within law enforcement. The LAPD, facing a PR nightmare, launched a new program focused on what they publicly termed the Statham Principle, the idea that true strength is measured by the force you choose not to use. A few weeks later, the Echo Park Community Council installed a small, discreet bronze plaque on the bench where it all began. It didn't mention any names. It simply read, "Strength is restraint. Power is peace." The final scene is a familiar one. The afternoon sun, a little gentler now, filters through the trees of Echo Park. Jason Statham sits on that same bench, sipping from a water bottle, quietly observing the vibrant flow of life around him. He has reclaimed his moment of peace. His legacy was reinforced, not because he fought back, but because he only fought when honor demanded it, and even then, his greatest weapon was his own character. True strength isn't about winning a fight. It's about having the wisdom and control to avoid one. What do you think is the true meaning of strength? Is it physical power, or the wisdom to control it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, please comment with respect for everyone in our community. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that matter.